Yorokobe. The video you're about to watch is the final entry of a 3-part series. If you haven't watched the previous 2 episodes, please do so first. Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. Today, we'll be wrapping up our analysis of Garden of Avalon by covering chapters 4, 5, and 6. It's the beginning of the end for our beloved King of Knights, and you won't want to miss a thing. Chapter 4, Setting Sail, takes place right before Artoria sets off to Rome. Once again, she's hanging out with Merlin at the harbor, about to say farewell. Essentially, Rome is taking advantage of Britain's vulnerability following their war against the Saxons. Rather than enduring this pressure, Artoria aims to take the fight to them. After leading a successful offensive, she plans to take advantage of the chaos to establish a peace treaty. Merlin's clairvoyance already informs him that this will work, but he also knows what will happen when she returns. In Artoria's absence, Britain will be cared for by Sir Kay, Mordred, and Gawain. Of them, Mordred will rally all the people dissatisfied with Artoria's reign and form a rebellion. At any other point in history, Artoria would have been able to suppress this uprising, but her campaign to Rome creates the perfect storm that will lead to her death. Strangely, Garden of Avalon doesn't mention Avalon the Scabbard even once, which is odd for how critical it is in the Battle of Camlann. From everything we learn in Fate Zero and Stay Night, Avalon is what grants Artoria her immortality. It creates a bounded field that basically puts Artoria's body in Avalon for a moment, allowing her to endure crazy shit like Enuma Elish and even true magic. It also heals people. Artoria winds up losing Avalon at some point, but it's never said exactly when and how. All we know is that it was stolen, and that she doesn't have it when she comes back from Rome, allowing her to die in battle. Yet, that part of the story is never even hinted at. Despite knowing all of this, Merlin decides not to tell Artoria the truth. Instead, he again mentions that Britain will fall to ruin no matter what she does. She just brushes it off as another one of his bad jokes, though. Eventually, Merlin admits he has no right to question Artoria's conviction, since it was he who raised her to this point. When the bell tolls for Artoria to board her ship, Merlin confesses he will not be joining her. He's gotta flee to Avalon since he's pissed off Vivian. The two of them laugh over Merlin's promiscuity, and Artoria thanks him for being her mentor. Without any experience with the opposite sex, she wonders if what she feels for him is love. Of course, Artoria has no experience with love, so this is only her expressing her gratitude. For as much of a playboy as Merlin is, his affections are very different from what a human feels, and so even as he claims to have fallen in love with her, it's not the typical love we imagine. Instead, there's irony in having two people who don't know much about human love trying to express it. As such, Artoria sails off without a proper understanding of her situation and how profoundly tragic it is. Chapter 5 is the Day of Camlann. As expected, Artoria signs a treaty with Rome with minimal casualties. While the sailors celebrate on their return trip, Artoria fears for the worst. Rome isn't weary of Britain, they're weary of Artoria, so their arrangement is really only useful so long as she lives. As they get closer, a fire can be spotted on the harbor in the distance. Mordred's rebellion has gained the support of 7 clans and 8 lords, who are now waiting to slay Artoria. In order for Artoria to so much as dock her ships, Sir Kay and Gawain have to fight their way through. Her men are exhausted from their battles in Rome, and Gawain is still injured from his duel with Lancelot. As a result, he is killed in a duel with Mordred. Kay, on the other hand, is stuck in the rear guard, never getting the chance to see Artoria. While Gawain died, he did so after wounding Mordred enough to keep her off the front lines, turning the Battle of Camlann into a 7-day war of attrition between their respective armies. Apparently, Mordred hoped to have Artoria murdered before it could come to this, but that plan failed, and the countryside suffered for it. I also happen to recall one reason behind Gawain's death, being that Lancelot came to help but was refused. That detail isn't in Garden of Avalon, though, strangely enough. While both retreating and giving chase, Artoria reasons that the rebels sided with Mordred because they couldn't endure the famine and warfare Artoria had put them through. She kept promising them a bright future, even though they were already at their limit. Just because she was able to press on doesn't mean her subjects could, and she failed to look back and notice. Finally realizing this breaks her spirit, diminishing Excalibur's light. Atop a mountain of corpses at Camlann, she admits that Tristan was right about her not understanding the human heart. Mordred, with her sword Clarent, declares the end of Artoria's country regardless of who wins. She desperately asks why she wasn't acknowledged as a son or heir to the throne, but Artoria gives no answer. Instead, the two fight, and Artoria uses Rongominiad to pierce and eviscerate the Knight of Rebellion. In return, Mordred's blade cracks Artoria's skull and carves into one of her eyes. Mordred dies first, but the king is clearly not long for this world either. Again, I find it interesting that Fate Apocrypha details that Artoria does in fact respond to Mordred, clarifying that there was no resentment. She just didn't think Mordred had what it took to be king. That's what's crazy about the Nasuverse. Even with an entire novel dedicated to Artoria, we still need to bring in other works to get the full story. Propping herself up with Excalibur, Artoria laments her fate, trying to hold back tears. She was prepared to suffer a tragic end, but she didn't think her people would suffer just as much. She knew Britain would perish, but not so violently. Knowing how things have turned out, she declares that everything that's led her to this point is wrong. Merlin, who is still stuck in Avalon, watches from afar, pained because he knew this is how she'd react. Sensing Artoria's disdain, the Counterforce calls out to her with the opportunity to become a heroic spirit. Even though she has yet to die, Artoria can ascend to the throne of heroes as a counter-guardian. In exchange for the chance to change her history, she offers herself up for the planet's protection. This prevents her from dying, frozen in time on this poor hill. Even if she averts Britain's ruin, she won't be able to reach Avalon, the place promised to her in the afterlife. Yet again, she sacrificed her own happiness for the sake of her people, only this time denying herself the only happiness ever afforded to her. In more simple terms, Artoria made a contract with the Counterforce. She believes the Holy Grail and its wish-granting properties will let her redo her reign as king, or even have someone else become king in her stead. So long as she covets the Grail, she'll remain a heroic spirit for the planet. The final chapter, 6, is titled In the Flower Garden. It returns to Merlin in the Tower of Avalon at some point in the modern era, presumably around the end of Artoria's story in the Fate route. Technically, time doesn't actually pass in Avalon, so I guess this is relative to the modern era between the two realms. He wakes up next to Cath Palug and decides to remodel the tower since he's resigned to stay here as a prisoner. He transforms the stone tower into a majestic spire and turns the area around it into a beautiful utopia of flowers. He's not dead, so he can't become a heroic spirit, at least not under normal circumstances. Fate Grand Order later fucks with this when Gilgamesh summons Merlin to Babylonia. This only works because Gilgamesh's time predates Merlin's own birth. That, and Merlin can kinda project himself to other places at his leisure. On all of the Stay Night timelines, however, Merlin's still stuck in the tower. He ruminates on the consequences of Artoria's pact with the planet. Unlike your typical heroic spirit, Artoria is still technically alive. By itself, Merlin thinks that Artoria might even be suited for the job as a counter-guardian, but what he can't accept is why she chose to be one. She's not doing any of this for herself, and is essentially becoming the planet's eternal slave to fix a part of history that she should be proud of. At this point, Merlin has no choice but to watch this tragedy play out. However, you probably know that in at least the Fate and Unlimited Bladeworks routes, Artoria finds contentment with her life and agrees to destroy the Grail. Deciding she no longer needs the Grail, she returns to the Battle of Camlann, hands off Excalibur to Bedivere to return to the Lady of the Lake, and dies peacefully in the forest. She finally embraces her own salvation, living her afterlife in the king's promised utopia. While stuck in this tower, Merlin doesn't have the same vision of the world, and thus he did not predict such an unexpected outcome. Regardless, he is overjoyed, feeling that Artoria's journey has been the most beautiful thing he's ever observed. Content to remain in his tower for the rest of eternity, Merlin orders Cath Palug to go free and also seek out something beautiful. In Fate Grand Order's timeline, we know that Cath Palug goes to Chaldea, where Mashu names him foe. This isn't in the light novel, but we know Merlin advises Artoria to wait eternally for Shiro to find and reunite with her in Avalon. I'm still totally convinced that Merlin spies on them while they're getting it on among the flowers. That's kinda where I want to leave this journey, by admitting there's still so much we don't know. For one, Mordred's perspective here is almost entirely left out, and you need Apocrypha to fill that gap. The audio drama actually has a scene with Bedivere at Artoria's death that the novel leaves out. There are still bits and pieces of Artoria's story you can only get from Fate Stay Night and Hollow Ataraxia, such as the lion cub and Kay's wood carvings. Fate Grand Order is still developing this stuff with Lost Belt 6, which I can only hope will clarify lots of missing details about Morgan. It's still weird realizing that she's technically the mother of Mordred, Agravain, Gawain, Gareth, and Gaheris. Nearly half of Artoria's knights all came from one woman, her nemesis no less. I'd love to know how all of Morgan's interactions fit in the timeline. Then there's the fact that Morgan is both a fairy and a witch. She's also supposed to be the opposite of Vivian, like Vivian's evil other half, so that's odd. There are still questions that I want answered, such as how exactly Caliburn got destroyed, and exactly how Avalon was stolen. I also want to know what Guinevere looks like, and let's not forget about the fun journeys that Artoria has with Merlin and Sir Kay before she even forms the Round Table. Plus, there's the fact that Merlin's supposed to be helping the Paladins of Charlemagne. How does he do that if he's sealed in Avalon? Basically, even after trying to understand Artoria for over a decade now, I'm still learning new things. I hope to one day compile everything into a truly definitive lore video that straight up tells her story in a chronological fashion. Until then, it's fun analyzing stuff like this, and I hope you've enjoyed my analysis of Garden of Avalon. Thanks for watching!
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
celebrate your fandom!
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: VideoGamer75, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Omagoden, Freebrick, RNGer Shuffles 1498, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Johnny Tsunami, Link Pendrago, Brandon Baker, Observer Bellis, Flash Daniel, Caitlin P, Vladimir Rovna, Normace, Jonathan Padua, The Taz 96, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you all so much.